questions. Questions orales. L'honorable.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. After 8 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost or the corruption. Today, the Conservatives received a letter from the RCMP Commissioner confirming that there is now an investigation, a police investigation underway on ArriveScan. The Commissioner confirmed at committee that the Prime Minister refused to provide documents for SNC-Lavalin and Aga Khan scams. Can the Prime Minister commit right now to deliver all the documents and all the evidence to the RCMP with respect to the ArriveScan app? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, we have said for several weeks now that the RCMP is seized with the ArriveScan affair, primarily because high representatives from the agency sent documents to the RCMP and have asked the RCMP to look at this affair. Several investigations are underway. We're going to continue, Mr. Speaker, to be available and to give authorities all the documents and information they need. Thank you. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
This Prime Minister is not worth the cost or the corruption. Today, Conservatives got a letter from the Commissioner of the RCMP indicating that the National Police Force is now formally investigating the ArriveScam and the Auditor General's report into it. Now, we know that the Auditor General the government deprived the Auditor General of key documents to calculate the full cost and the breadth of the scandal. We also know that the Prime Minister refused to hand over documents in the SNC-Lavalin and the Aga Khan Island scandals. Will the Prime Minister commit here and now to giving the RCMP all the documents and evidence on ArriveScam?
The Honourable Minister for Public Security.
Mr. Speaker, again, the Leader of the Opposition seems to be impressed with some information that's been known in the public space for many weeks. The RCMP have confirmed previously that they're looking into the circumstances around ArriveScan. We have total confidence in the RCMP to do this important work. I'll remind the Leader of the Opposition that the President of the Border Services Agency referred these questions proactively to the RCMP, and we'll continue to do whatever we need to do, Mr. Speaker, to cooperate with the National Police Force and every other ongoing investigation.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Other investigation. How many police investigations are they facing, Mr. Speaker? After 8 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost of food. Today, we got a terrible report from the charity Second Harvest, which reports that this year they expect 1 million additional visits to food banks, and that last year 36% of charities had to turn people away because they were running out of resources. Will the Prime Minister reverse his inflationary carbon tax on farmers and food?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, when it comes to Fight for Canadians, we will take no lessons from these conservatives, Mr. Speaker. Today, I just appeared in front of the Agricultural Committee, and Mr. Speaker, it was shocking to see that one of their members was defending the profit margin of foreign food processor, Mr. Speaker, at a time when we should all be fighting in this House for Canadians, Mr. Speaker. If the Leader of the Opposition want to do something for Canadians, vote for C-59, increase competition in this country. More competition is more choice, better price for Canadians, and more innovation, Mr. Speaker. Canadians understand that. Will he understand?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, what I understand is that after 8 years, this Prime Minister, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister, is not worth the cost of food. And if you thought that grocery profits were too high, after 8 years, you'd think he might have done something about it. But instead, we now have a massive increase. Let's get this straight. Second Harvest predicts there will be 1 million more visits to food banks this year than there was in last year's record-breaking year. In fact, many charities can no longer give people food because they've actually run out. In light of the failure of the carbon tax and the pain it is causing, will they axe the tax so that Canadians can afford to eat?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
One thing Canadians Canadians know, Mr. Speaker, is that the Leader of Opposition, the preferred verb is cut, Mr. Speaker. We all know he would be cutting. When you're looking at the record on both sides, Mr. Speaker, let me tell you what we have done in the last few months to fight for Canadians, Mr. Speaker. We have launched the largest reform on competition in this nation history. We have made sure that we have a functioning Consumers Bureau of Affairs, Mr. Speaker. We have made sure that we have now in this country more measures to fight for Canadians. Mr. Speaker, every member of this House should be fighting for Canadians. The question is, will the Conservative fight with us for Canadians?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, after that answer just proves that after 8 years, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the cost. It's not just that 1 million more people will visit food banks this year than in last year's record-smashing year. It's that now there's a large Facebook group of 800 people, 8,000 people, who call themselves the Dumpster Diving Network. So desperate are they that not only can they not afford groceries or find it at food banks, that they're literally jumping into garbage cans to find food. How desperate do Canadians have to get before this government will finally axe its tax on food?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, over the past 8 years, I have watched time and time again the Conservatives stand up to vote against the very measures that are putting money in the pockets of families to help them cover the cost of food. When it comes to the Canada Child Benefit, we stopped sending checks to millionaires so we could put more money in the pockets of 9 out of 10 families. When it comes to taxes, we raise taxes on the wealthiest 1% to cut them for the middle class. When it comes to seniors, we put more money in the pockets of low-income single seniors. On every one of these measures, the Conservatives have opposed them. We will continue to do what's necessary to allow families to put food on the table, no matter how hard they oppose.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Everyone should be worried about the Liberals and NDP's love of spending, but Quebecers have one more reason. Spending isn't one of our priorities. They're spending to give Canadians what Quebecers already have. First it was daycare, then it was privately run dental care, while Quebec already has its own publicly run system. Now it's Quebecers' drug coverage they want to offer Canadians. Since they're simply imitating Quebec's expertise in pharmacare, will Quebec have the right to opt out with full compensation? The Honourable Minister of Health. Soon, Mr. Speaker, there will be a bill at the House of Commons that will offer the opportunity to reduce prices on drugs and to increase access to medications. And I hope that all members and all here in this House will support this legislation. But it's important not to criticize something that hasn't come out yet. We need to wait for the bill to be presented. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Even more urgently, we need full compensation and an unconditional right to opt out of dental care. Quebec already has its own plan, and it's public. Also, unlike the NDP Liberal plan, which brings the private sector into healthcare through the front door, Quebec already has clearly expressed its desire to improve its own plan. If Quebec is innovative enough in healthcare to be imitated in Canada, it must be good enough to have its expertise respected. When will Quebec receive its unconditional share of federal dental funding? The Honourable Minister of Health. Once again, Mr. Speaker, it's clear that the Bloc is seeking arguments. And for us, our attention is focused on increasing the quality of health care of Canadians across the country. In Quebec, for example, Quebecers, well, it's essential for them, for everyone across the province to receive the dental care they need, and that's our objective. And it's in a spirit of cooperation that we can obtain this. It's not through squabbles. The Honourable Member for Rosemont-La Petite Patrie. Mr. Speaker, a recent report has revealed that 30% of Quebecers don't have a GP. 1 out of 3 don't have a family doctor. The Prime Minister promised to invest and provide healthcare providers, but people still don't have a family doctor. Health transfers are not coming, and Quebec is paying for the broken promises of this government. When will the Liberals do their share so that all Quebecers have a family doctor? The Honourable Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, it's notable that the Canadian government $200 million extra over the next 10 years for healthcare. And yes, it does take time to find a good agreement with every province and territory. But clearly, by end March, there will be agreement with every province and territory to increase the quality of healthcare and to ensure that our healthcare system is the best possible system in the world. That's our objective, and it is only possible through cooperation.
For Kingsway.
Mr. Speaker, every Canadian should have access to the health care they need when they need it. But a new survey reveals over 6 million Canadians don't have access to a family doctor. The Liberals promised to hire 7,500 doctors and nurses in the last election, but haven't delivered. And while Liberals delay, Conservatives want to cut the healthcare people depend on. When will the Liberals act to ensure more doctors and nurses are hired so everyone can get high quality and timely healthcare?
The Honourable Minister for Health.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And coming out of a pandemic, coming out of some of the most difficult times that our planet has ever faced in terms of global health, we have stepped forward. I want to thank the member in the NDP for his work and for pointing out that the Conservatives will cut and cut deeply. When they talk about what their plans are, they fail to mention to achieve them, they are going to need to cut billions and billions out of health with devastating consequences. In contrast, we are investing in every province, in every territory of this country to make sure that we have the best healthcare system in the country. We will be relentless in that focus, and we will not let the Conservatives deter us.
The Honourable Member from Regina Capel.
Well, common sense Conservatives will axe the tax, build the home, fix the budget, and stop the crime. This NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the cost, and he's going to make everything more expensive on April 1st with another carbon tax hike, and the effects on Canadians are devastating. A new report from GoFundMe says that Canadians started 200,000 online charity drives to help raise money just to cover day-to-day expenses. Instead of forcing Canadians to ask for help from online crowdsourcing campaigns, why doesn't the Prime Minister do the obvious thing? Cancel his carbon tax hike and stop making things more expensive.
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, last year was the hottest year on record on the planet. And the Conservative leader and his party continue to deny climate change. Meanwhile, with our carbon rebate, we are putting money back into the pockets of Canadian families. Are they going to vote against $1,200 for Ontario families, $1,800 for Alberta families, $1,200 for Manitoba families? That doesn't sound like common sense to me, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Regina Capel.
We're going to axe the tax and leave the money in Canadians' pockets in the first place. And Canadians aren't fooled by the shell game. They know the rebate doesn't cover all the costs of the carbon tax as manufacturers and producers raise their prices to pay their share of the carbon tax, and all that gets passed on to consumers. But you know, sites like GoFundMe used to be used to help children who lost their parents tragically, and now Canadians are turning to crowdsourcing to help pay their food bills. Officials say that 56,000 campaigns were started just to pay for the cost of food alone. Why doesn't the Prime Minister just axe the tax so prices can come down?
Before the Honourable President of the Treasury Board gets up to respond to that question, I'm going to encourage all members, please, on both sides of the House, to please allow the person who is asking the question to ask it uninterrupted, and allow the person to answer the question uninterrupted. The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, the difference between that side of the House and this side of the House is that we don't deny the existence of climate change, and we want to protect it for generations to come. So I have, again, a question. Are you going to take money away from Canadian families, Mr. Speaker, by voting against $1,200 $1,200 for Ontario families, $1,800 for Alberta families, $1,200 for Manitoba families. Mr. Speaker, that's taking money away from Canadians by telling them they're not going to have the rebates and voting against. That's not common sense.
I'm going to ask the honourable member from St. Albert's, Edmonton, please. And to all members, it's really important that we do listen to the question. It's hard for the Speaker to understand. I understand perhaps that the President of the Treasury Board was referring to the Speaker. I hope the comments do fall through the Speaker, of course. The honourable member from Thornhill.
After 8 years of this Liberal NDP government, carbon taxes are driving up the cost of food. People are literally turning to dumpsters because they can't afford groceries. A report from the Toronto Star says dumpster diving is a new trend. So here's what you won't read in the Star. Conservatives will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. What does the Toronto Star have to write in order for this radical environment minister to show some compassion and stop the 23% April 1st tax hike for all Canadians?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, as I said, on this side of the House, we'll continue to fight climate change while putting money back into the pockets of Canadian families. As I mentioned, that means we're going to be providing rebates to Canadians, money back in their pockets, which the Conservatives are going to vote against. So I ask you, Mr. Speaker, through you to the opposition, when are they going to stop cutting supports to Canadians and pay attention to the most vulnerable in this country?
The honourable member from Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, the radical environment minister who couldn't sell his own carbon tax, which the Prime Minister had to rebrand, won't even get up and answer the question. How is he going to rebrand dumpster diving? This is the minister who wants to ban cars, ban roads, ban Canadian energy, ban straws, and ban stoves, and tells Canadians that they have it better. We all know that after 8 years, this tired government and the environment minister are out of control, but will someone over there stand up for struggling Canadians and let him walk back his carbon tax hike like he has to do with everything else?
Order. Order. The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we'll be standing up for Canadians. Every single member on this House is willing to stand on this side, Mr. Speaker. And whilst the Conservative would like to make a story, just look at our records, Mr. Speaker, when it comes. Just look at our record, Mr. Speaker. We have led the industrial revolution in electric cars, Mr. Speaker. We have brought more investment.
Order. I hate to interrupt a member while they have the floor, but it is important for the chair to ask all members to allow members to please have that opportunity. I'll ask, there are some members whose voices carry. They know who they are. I ask them to please keep their voices down so I could allow the honourable member to finish his question with 15 seconds left on the clock. 15 seconds.
Speaker, I'd like to remind Canadians know that on this side of the House, we believe you can fight climate change and have a prosperous future for our children, Mr. Speaker. We brought Stellantis in this country. We brought Volkswagen in this country. We brought Norval in this country. Mr. Speaker, we have created jobs for the next generation, fight climate change, and ensure Canada will lead in the 21st century.
The honourable member for Kenora.
While Conservatives will axe the tax, fix the homes, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime, this NDP Liberal.
Order. Colleagues. Colleagues, I think it's important for all of us to remember. I'm going to ask. I think it's important for all of us to remember the old expression, there, but for the grace of God I go. And we've all sometimes made a mistake. I'm going to ask the honourable member from Kenora to start his question again from the top.
While Conservatives will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime, Mr. Speaker, 1 in 5 families are living in energy poverty, and we know that rate is even higher in rural areas like Northern Ontario, Mr. Speaker. So while they laugh about it, why doesn't this Prime Minister finally axe his April carbon tax hike so that Canadians can afford to heat their homes?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
I think that member of Parliament needs to be unplugged from the wall and plugged back in, Mr. Speaker. But here's what I hope happens when that reboot occurs. I hope he'll get up from his place, walk down to the Leader of the Opposition and say, pass the fall economic statement, help Canadians. Pass child care, help the moms and dads out there who are waiting for those needed supports. Tell that to his leader. When will that member, instead of trying to get the leader's lines right, stand up for Canadians and get them the supports that they need?
Thank you. The honourable member from Kenora has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, no matter how much they try to distract or deny it, their plan simply isn't working. The carbon tax isn't an environmental plan because emissions are on the rise. More Canadians are paying more in the tax than they're getting back in rebates. 1 in 5 families are living in energy poverty, and 2 million Canadians are going to a food bank every single month. Mr. Speaker, how much more must Canadians struggle before they finally listen to our common sense plan and axe the tax?
So I noticed, and I think a lot of Canadians noticed at home, how the honourable member from Kenora was able to ask his question relatively free of interruption. I'm going to ask the honourable minister to respond, Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, while Conservatives still debate whether or not climate change is real, while some of those members say that climate change is actually created by body heat from humans, others say that carbon dioxide is good for the planet, Mr. Speaker. 200,000 farmers in the last decade, 200,000 farmers in the last decade say they've experienced the impacts of climate change, making food costs going up. There's no link between carbon pricing and food price, but there is a link between climate change impacts and food prices. What's the Conservative response? More climate change, Mr. Speaker.
Order, colleagues. Order.
The honourable member for Shefford. Yesterday, MPs from all parties, Liberal, Conservative, New Democrats and the Bloc, unanimously voted to do away with 2 classes of seniors for old age security payments. Remember that the government decided to limit benefit increases to those aged 75 and over. Well, in committee, MPs from all parties voted to end this bad idea. All that remains is for the government to grant the royal recommendation so that we can put an end to these 2 classes of seniors. Will they do it? Will they give a grant royal recommendation to Bill C-319?
The Honourable Labour.
Since 2015, we've been here for seniors. The OAS increase was the right thing to do, as seniors are running down their savings and need health care. We also enhanced the GIS, as well as old age security, introduced a new dental care system. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. When it comes to asylum seekers, the Minister of Immigration has some cheek. Since 2021, Quebec has been asking the federal government to reimburse costs and share the burden of welcoming newcomers for 3 years. And today, the minister has the nerve to assert, and I quote, that he never got the impression that Quebec really wanted to sit down. He complained that from one day to the next, Quebec throws expenses at him at press briefings. Does he realize that if he'd paid his debts since 2021 and if he negotiated instead of hiding, there wouldn't be a problem today? The Honourable Minister of Immigration. I think it's fair to talk about the reality. Imagine if I send a 500 bill when we're talking, and next time I have a press conference and I double the bill without justifying the doubling of the expenses. We need responsible government, and I'm talking about people in my riding in the downtown Montreal who welcome asylum seekers, and they haven't received 1 cent from Quebec government. We have to justify these cents. We're ready to work with the government of Quebec. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, the bill would be lower if the federal government processed asylum seekers with an acceptable time frame, and that's Liberal David Hurtel, who reminds us this in the Journal de Montreal. Quebec, under Philippe Couillard, experienced the same issues in 2018. Already, Quebec was asking for the federal government to shorten delays. What should take a maximum of 60 days shouldn't take a minimum of 60 months. 6 years later, nothing has changed. According to the former Liberal minister, the federal government's inaction is criminal. When will the minister finally tackle these criminal, inhumane, and extremely costly delays? The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. The member is partly right. True, there is a historical flow of people coming to Canada to seek asylum. There's a 50 or 60% increase. There's more work to be done, but it doesn't involve sending money to Quebec that is not spending on asylum seekers. It has to be fair, and there are a lot of people moving to Ontario, and we help them there too, and we need, first and foremost, to treat these people humanely. We're ready to do this, and I hope Quebec is as well.
The Honourable Member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Well, common sense Conservatives will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget and stop the crime. After 8 years of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister, he's not worth the cost, the crime or the corruption. And today the Commissioner of the RCMP confirmed that their scandal-plagued $60 million Arrive scam app is in fact under RCMP investigation. Now, we've seen before this Prime Minister use powers of the executive to try and shield himself from criminal investigations, like he did with his trip to the Aga Khans Island and in SNC-Lavalin scandal, both seeing him found guilty of breaking the Ethics Act. Will the Prime Minister fully cooperate with this RCMP investigation?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, not only will the government cooperate with the RCMP at every occasion, in fact, it's the government that referred a number of these cases to the RCMP. My friend has just realized what the RCMP confirmed some weeks ago, that they are looking into the issue of ArriveCAN. Mr. Speaker, our government thinks it's important that the Auditor General's report be followed carefully, and we think it's important for parliamentary committees and other investigations to determine the facts in this issue before we throw mud around the House of Commons.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Well, if the minister and his colleagues thought that the Auditor General's work was so important, they wouldn't have voted against the audit that the Leader of the Opposition and Common Sense Conservatives voted for. And that's how we found out about this $60 million scandal that lands at that minister's feet. And now we have the RCMP investigating them. Twice before, the Prime Minister has used the powers of the executive to shield himself from investigation in criminal investigations with the RCMP. Our question is simple this time. Will the Prime Minister interfere in the investigation again, or will he allow the RCMP to do their work?
The Honourable Minister for Public Works.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Yes, I'd like to underscore the remarkable work of the Auditor General, her support to the RCMP's operations. Well, as she has mentioned several weeks ago, she's already said this publicly on several occasions. Perhaps we could find the member to find places where she said that. She said clearly that she was already communicating with the RCMP to make sure she gets the information.
From Brantford Brant.
Mr. Speaker, breaking news today from the Ethics Committee. The RCMP have now confirmed they are investigating the $60 million plus Arrive scam boondoggle. While common sense Conservatives will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime, this NDP PM is not worth the cost, crime or corruption after 8 years. Will the Prime Minister cooperate with the RCMP in their criminal investigation, or will he yet again try to obstruct?
The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement.
Speaker, we know how good the Conservative Party is in providing slogans and doing all sorts of those things. It's a bit strange, however, that this is breaking news, because it's been known for many weeks now that the RCMP and the Auditor General have been working really well together, and they'll be keeping working together really well. That's what their job is about.
From Brantford Brant.
Perhaps the minister needs to review the evidence from the Ethics Committee. A two-person consultant company working out of their basement doing no IT work received $20 million tax dollars. Talk about hitting the taxpayer lottery. This sham of a company is already under RCMP investigation. Today we learned the RCMP is investigating this into all kinds of criminality. So I'll ask again, will the Prime Minister fully cooperate, waive all cabinet confidences, or will he hide again and obstruct?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable colleague learned something today that has been known in the public domain for a number of weeks. Mr. Speaker, we have said from the beginning, the government's responsibility is to ensure that taxpayers' money is always managed well. In this case, Mr. Speaker, the Auditor General identified a number of opportunities that needed to be investigated and where the government will follow all of the recommendations. And Mr. Speaker, if people have done something inappropriate with taxpayers' money, they will be held to account.
The Honourable Member from Nunavut.
People in the north are paying enormous amounts for food as the CEOs of the grocery chains make millions of dollars. Nunavut have said for years that Nutrition North is not working and this government is ignoring them. Nutrition North is keeping many Northerners in poverty as the subsidy is going to CEO profits, not lowering food prices. Why is this minister padding the pockets of rich CEOs instead of helping Northerners afford their groceries?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister for Northern Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for that very important question. We know that food prices in the north are too high. Affordability is a real issue in the north. Our government is absolutely committed to ensuring that 100% of the Nutrition North retail subsidy is passed on directly to Northerners. We have worked and we will continue to work with territorial governments, with Indigenous partners, and with people who live in the North and the Arctic to bring prices down. There's a lot of work to do. We are committed to getting it done.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member from Hamilton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, personal support workers are the backbone of our senior care system. They relieve young families worried about how they will take care of both their children and their parents. But despite everything they do, many of these workers cannot retire with the dignity they deserve. And for 3 years, this Liberal government has promised SEIU and other healthcare units help with building a retirement savings, a $50 million commitment, yet not a single dollar has flowed to these workers. New Democrats demand better for our care workers. So, will this Liberal government honor their commitment and release the funds that these healthcare workers deserve before the fiscal year?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
First of all, Mr. Speaker, let me say a huge thank you to personal support care workers. During the pandemic, which was a time so difficult for all of us, it was enormously difficult for personal support workers who did extraordinary work. And we did make a commitment to support provinces. It's the provinces who have principal responsibility for this. We expect them to step up and support personal support workers. We've said we're there to help them, but it's their lead, and they need to make sure that these individuals are compensated and acknowledged in the way that they deserve.
The honourable member from Newmarket, Aurora.
Mr. Speaker, last November, our government tabled legislation to ban the use of replacement workers in federally regulated industries, a commitment from our 2021 election platform. This is something that the labour movement in Canada has been asking for since before Canada was a country. This will make both the collective bargaining process stronger and make employers and unions focus on the negotiating table where the best deals are made. Will the Minister of Labour explain to this House how our bill to ban replacement workers will strengthen the collective bargaining process in this country?
The Honourable Minister of Labour.
Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the member from Newmarket Aurora for the question. Mr. Speaker, we are banning replacement workers. We are banning replacement workers because we believe in collective bargaining, because the best deals are made at the table, because bigger paychecks are negotiated at the table, because better labor relations and long-term stability are created at the table. Let's keep that bargaining table free and fair with the full support of every MP in this House. With unanimous consent, let's vote to move Bill C-58. Let's make some history. Let's ban replacement workers.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Cut the taxes, build the homes, fix the budget, stop the crime. That's the common sense Conservative plan. Common sense is also getting to the bottom of the vastness of the ArriveCan scandal. Now, the Bloc may be able to turn a blind eye to millions of wasted dollars. The Conservatives, however, we want to get to the bottom of the ArriveCan scandal. So, will the RCMP cooperate, and will the Minister cooperate? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would first like to commend my colleague, who I much appreciate. I'd like to commend him on his skill at repeating his leader's slogans. So they're really great with the slogans, but not so great at following the news, because for weeks now, the Auditor General has been working with many organizations, including the RCMP, to get to the bottom of the issues mentioned in her report published a few weeks ago. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Well, if my colleague had better awareness of what's going on in Canada, Mr. Speaker, he would know that after 8 years of this Liberal Prime Minister, 2 million Canadians use food banks each month. In fact, food banks have to, wait in line themselves to have enough food for the people waiting in line for food at the food banks, and that's what this Canada is under this Prime Minister. The Bloc Québécois and the Liberals found a way to spend $60 million for an app that should have cost $80,000. So will the Prime Minister fully cooperate with the RCMP, or will he once again engage in an Arrive scam cover-up? The Honourable Innovation Minister. Mr. Speaker, what Canadians see on TV is a Conservative Party that is against all measures, against everything, Mr. Speaker. Every time we have presented measures to help Canadians, they have systematically voted against them. It's important to know that, Mr. Speaker. They voted against reforming the Competition Act. That's one of the most important reforms in Canada. So Canadians are watching the Conservatives on TV. They see them. Here's a question for the Conservatives, Mr. Speaker. Will they vote in favour of our bill to offer consumers better choice and to improve competition in Canada? It's time for the Conservatives to do something for Canadians. The Honourable Member for Charlesbourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the RCMP Commissioner was very clear this morning, saying that there should be a full investigation into RCMP. But then the RCMP Commissioner said in committee that the Prime Minister had blocked the SNC-Lavalin investigation and the Aga Khan investigation. So will the Prime Minister confirm that he will fully cooperate in the RCMP's investigation without blocking or hindering it? The Honourable Public Safety Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, Once again, I'm very happy that my colleague has noticed something that's been well known for a few weeks now. My colleague, the Minister of Procurement and Public Services, confirmed that the Auditor General investigated contracts to the CBSA, and that is a worrisome situation. But now, of course, Mr. Speaker, the government's responsibility is to ensure that measures are in place to ensure that this does not reoccur, and it is our duty to cooperate with law enforcement and police agencies which will investigate. The Honourable Member of Charlesbourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. But you know what? In 2021, the government voted against an inquiry by the Auditor General. So, 10,000 people had to quarantine because of Arrive scam, a tool which was not at all working. So, Mr. Speaker, can the Prime Minister confirm once and for all that he will not hinder the RCMP's investigation? Can he confirm that he will give all the documents that we need so that we can fully shed light on what happened with Arrive scam? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, we have given many answers to this question many times, but there's a question we've asked that remains unanswered. Given the politics of intimidation, insult, given that the leader of the Conservative Party likes to give insults and intimidations, will he, in fact, meet the Municipal Council of Quebec next week to tell elected officials in Quebec why the Conservative leader is calling Quebec officials incompetent? The Honourable Member for Beauport-Limoilou. I ask the member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier to please let the colleague whose turn it is ask her question. Once again, the member for Beauport-Limoilou. Thank you. ArriveCan is the consequence of the federal government's dependence on dubious consultants. GC Strategies, a two-man operation that doesn't offer any services, pocketed $20 million. And they're not the only ones. Dalian, another two-man firm that once again doesn't offer any services, got $8 million. 99% of Dalian's contracts are with the federal government. And it's hard to know what Dalian is actually doing with our money because La Presse has reported that Dalian operates in 2 tax havens. How many other companies like this is the federal government handing our money to? And what is it doing to make sure that they repay our money? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, the ArriveCan situation is, of course, unacceptable, and that's why work is ongoing. Investigations are being conducted. Now, as for tax havens, that's just as unacceptable. We have a competent team with all the tools they need to investigate. They can investigate any file as soon as it becomes necessary. The Honourable Member for Terrebonne. Dependence on dubious consultants is not limited to ArriveCan, nor is it limited to Liberals. The Conservatives themselves, under Stephen Harper, awarded millions in contracts to Corridal, a company that offered no services that was founded by the same 2 people who pocketed $20 million for ArriveCan. Thankfully, the committee will be investigating all the contracts awarded to these 2 individuals, but we need to take things further. Will the government commit to disclosing all the contracts since 2004 between both the Conservatives and the Liberals and all the companies that offer no services other than finding subcontractors? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, just under 4 years ago, Canada experienced the worst health crisis in a century, the worst economic crisis since the 30s. We had to close the border at the request of then-President Trump. There were hundreds of people dying each week in long-term care homes everywhere across the country, so we needed to take action quickly and effectively. That's what we asked the public service to do. But the public service did have to follow rules. Unfortunately, some of these rules were not followed. That is what the Auditor General concluded.
The Honourable Member from Calgary-Midnapore.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost, crime, or corruption. This government spent a minimum of $60 million on Arrive Scan. It could even be more. We don't know because there's missing documentation. IT middleman GC Strategies got $20 million for doing no actual work. The top cop in the RCMP announced today a full investigation into a Rise scam. So today the Prime Minister has a decision to make. Will he cooperate with the RCMP or will he obstruct justice like he usually does?
The Honourable Minister for Public Works.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, this question has received multiple answers, including from our colleague, the Minister of Public Safety. If the Conservatives are trying to find new questions to ask, may I suggest a couple of them? Why, for instance, during the 8 years of our government, have we built 10 times more homes than during the 10 years of the Conservative government? Why has poverty fallen by half in Canada? Why is the Canada Child Benefit taking out of poverty 400,000 children and their parents every single month? And a couple other questions, Mr. Speaker, of which we would be interested to hear from the Conservative members.
The Honourable Member from Calgary-Midnapore.
Mr. Speaker, even the Auditor General said that a crisis situation is no excuse for this lack of value for money for Canadians. Conservatives have put forward today a motion related to a Rise scam to get money back from the contractors who did no actual work. There is one person in this chamber who can make that decision, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has the power to make the decision to get the money back for hard-working Canadians. So will the Prime Minister commit today to getting the money back for Canadians, or will he shirk his responsibility like he usually does?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, on the contrary, our government has said from the beginning that those that have misused taxpayers' money will be held to account. And once the investigations that the CBSA, for example, has ordered internally, once the RCMP report is completed, if in fact money was misappropriated, of course the government will take all the steps to recoup that money. Mr. Speaker, we've said from the beginning that anybody who mishandles taxpayers' money will face the consequences, and that's exactly what this government is doing.
The Honourable Member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Mr. Speaker, those who misuse taxpayers' money will face the consequences in the next election. While common sense Conservatives will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime, the NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the cost, crime, or corruption after 8 years. We've heard today ministers telling us that RCMP criminal investigation into corruption in their government has become so commonplace that after 8 years, it's not really news anymore. Mr. Speaker, I'm old enough to remember a time when it was a big deal that the RCMP investigated the government. It's been too many times, and it's time this government be held to account. Now, finally, will the minister tell us whether or not this government will cooperate with the RCMP investigation?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, just because my honourable friend asserts something with manufactured indignation doesn't make it true. What we've said from the beginning, Mr. Speaker, is that we take the responsibility to manage taxpayers' money very seriously. That's why when the Border Services Agency identified irregularities, they began an internal investigation and they referred the matter, as is appropriate, to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Mr. Speaker, our government will always do what's necessary to hold everyone to account who may have misused taxpayers' money.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Member from Winnipeg South Centre.
Mr. Speaker, Indigenous tourism has the power to create jobs, to transform the tourism industry, and to advance reconciliation. Indigenous tourism is valued at over $1.2 billion and supports over 30,000 jobs across the country. In November, the Minister of Tourism announced the creation of the micro and small business component of the Indigenous Tourism Fund. Can the minister tell us how our government is supporting the Indigenous tourism industry in order to ensure its continued growth? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Minister of Tourism. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my colleague for his question. The Indigenous Tourism Fund seeks to advance economic reconciliation. Today, at the International Conference on Indigenous Tourism, our government announced over 79 projects. Unlike the Conservatives, who want to slash the Indigenous Tourism Fund, on this side of the House, we believe in their future.
Support Indigenous tourism, and we will always support their communities to make their own decision, choosing their own path, and growing the tourism sector on their own pace. Merci, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Cumberland Colchester.
Mr. Speaker, let's make a contrast. While common sense Conservatives will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime, this Prime Minister is tripping over his feet trying to save his reputation by covering up yet another scandal. He's not worth the cost, the crime, or the corruption. Will the Prime Minister release all the Winnipeg lab documents today, or will the shame and embarrassment be too much to endure?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, Mr. Speaker, you know, when it comes to redactions, it was the Public Health Agency that conducted them. And I would ask the opposition, if their position is that a government should be involved in redacting documents, that's a deeply disturbing thing for them to hold as a proposition. Instead, what happened is we asked Parliament, and it was actually our suggestions, the Conservatives refused to look at the documents or participate, eventually they did, to ensure that parliamentarians could look at what information was there and make a decision if the redactions done by the Public Health Agency were or were not appropriate. The process worked. It was a process that we introduced, and it was one that they supported eventually.
The honourable member from Cumberland Colchester.
Well, Speaker, let's make a contrast again. Two scientists at our only high-security lab collaborated with the Beijing government. At least one Beijing military scientist was allowed in the lab. Members of Parliament, including Liberals, have said that it is essential for the government to release the documents. Why are the Liberals still covering up the scandal? Are they afraid of the embarrassment? This Liberal government needs to release those lab documents today for all Canadians to see.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm in the awkward position of agreeing. We are actually the ones who said the documents need to be looked at by parliamentarians. We were the ones that introduced a process that asked parliamentarians to get together. Unfortunately, the Conservatives said no. Eventually, they did participate, and then parliamentarians had an opportunity to take a look at the redactions done by the Public Health Agency, and now those documents, after the work of parliamentarians have been done, will be shared, and that's exactly what we wanted to happen, to make sure that there is maximum public exposure, at the same time respecting our national security laws.
The honourable member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. This is unreal. I don't know how they even look themselves in the mirror at night. Now, Mr. Speaker, we, the common sense Conservatives, are going to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and, what's more, stop the crime. This Liberal government, they allow violent criminals to serve their sentences in the comfort of their living rooms. And they're allowing this in partnership with the Bloc Québécois. A teenage girl was lured by a former police officer who is serving his sentence at home. I'll give you another example. A woman was attacked at knife point by her ex-husband, who had been arrested twice for domestic violence. When will the Liberals stop their soft-on-crime policies and protect victims instead of criminals? The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada. Well, if this is the matter here is about intimate partner violence and domestic violence, and that is a top priority on this side of the House. Now, we have addressed the situation in two ways, in both C-75 and in C-48. In terms of conditions for release on bail for those who commit this type of crime. We will always fight against domestic violence, and we will protect men and women everywhere in Canada.
The honourable member from Kings Hants.
Speaker, last week the Minister of Agriculture was in Malaysia and the Philippines on a trade mission to promote and secure new markets for our agri-food products. Instead of taking a Team Canada approach to promoting trade, and Speaker, I will say they've been a bit iffy on trade, just ask Ukraine, the Conservatives decided to gaslight and critique the minister for simply highlighting the importance.
Colleagues, I'm actually having difficulty hearing the latter part of the question. I'm going to ask all members on all sides to please carry your conversations a lot quieter so that we can hear the member who is far away from the chair. The honourable member has, I'm going to give him 20 seconds, add 5 seconds, 20 seconds to his question.
So, Speaker, as I was saying, the Conservatives are not very happy on trade right now, but the minister was in the Philippines and Malaysia promoting trade and the importance of seafood industry to Atlantic Canada. Can the minister update this House on his trade mission and educate the member from Thornhill on the importance of lobster to Atlantic Canada? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable colleague for giving me another opportunity to promote world-class Canadian product, including lobster. Farmers and fishers expect their government to open new markets, and in fact, that's just what we did. I officially opened the new Indo-Pacific Trade Office that will help promote Canadian agriculture and seafood products. I always promote Canadian products overseas when I'm overseas, Mr. Speaker, no matter in the government or opposition. And it's vitally important that we promote the fishers and farmers who work so hard for their dollar.
The Honourable Member from Vancouver East.
More than 8 million people in Sudan have been displaced through 10 months of war. This has been devastating for people in Sudan and their family members in Canada. The special immigration measure for Ukrainians set important standards, and it should apply everywhere else. Canada showed that we can help those facing war and persecution. 220,000 Ukrainians got to safety, but the Liberals put an arbitrary 1,000-person limit for people in Gaza and 3,250 for Sudan. Will the minister lift these caps so that no Canadian family in war zones is discriminated against?
The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the member well knows, the pathway for people fleeing war in Sudan opens today. We worked on this with a number of Sudanese umbrella organizations on this important measure so that Canadians are really showing and opening their doors to people fleeing war. I'm always ready to be more flexible as we see the situation evolve, and it's clear that we, as Canadians, need to do more when it comes to, in particular, this forgotten war that obviously is getting less media attention than all of the other devastating wars around the world. But we're prepared to do more, and we'll continue to work with the umbrella organizations to make sure that they can welcome Sudanese people fleeing war. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Victoria.
Mr. Speaker, 30% of the screening officers at Victoria's airport have lost their jobs without due process and with no access to an appeal. Their employer wanted to keep them on, but the Canadian Air Transport Security Authority interfered, undermining labor relations and costing people their jobs. To make matters worse, the Minister of Transportation refuses to meet with them. Yet again, the Liberals are dropping the ball when it comes to protecting workers. Why is the minister refusing to meet with these workers and their union?
The Honourable Minister of Labour.
I thank the honourable member for her question, and I can say certainly today of all days, we certainly stand with workers and we stand with a stable and fair working environment. I will look into the situation that you described immediately. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
It being 3:18, the House will now proceed to the taking of the deferred recorded division on the motion